Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Mordechai Katkis with a Devar Torah on this week's portion. Tomorrow night begins a very special Sabbath, Parashat Yitro. Parashat Yitro is a parasha in which we received the Torah at Sinai. We celebrate the giving of the Torah on the holiday of Shavuot. Therefore, we find in mystical sources that this coming Shabbat, Parashat Yitro, has a very deep connection to the holiday of Shavuot, which is translated as Pentecost. The books say we can almost feel the power and the holiness of Shavuot on this coming Shabbos. So hopefully we will merit to feel this wonderful feeling of holiness. When the people came to Mount Sinai, they were offered the Torah from God through Moshe. And Moses told them, you will be a nation of priests and a holy people. You will be a treasure. He was trying to motivate them and say it's worth it. You'll be a holy treasure, a very, very special people. And people answered, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will understand. As opposed to other nations who were also offered the Torah, and they said, what does it say? They asked a question. They were not willing to accept the Torah. The Jewish people was willing to accept the Torah, and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will later understand. We find a very interesting passage in chapter 19, verse 17. The Torah tells us, "Vayitzvu b'tachtit hahar," and the people stood by the bottom of the mountain. The rabbis in our tradition tell us that they stood under the mountain. B'tachtit means under the mountain. This is brought down in Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, that he actually stood under the mountain. And what was the point of standing under the mountain? It says in the Gemara Shabbat, Daf Peichet, page 88, that God picked up the mountain like an upside down bowl and he put it over their heads. Why did he do that? So the Talmud tells us that God said to them, you must accept the Torah, otherwise you're going to be buried right here. And of course, the commentators ask, they just said we will do and we will understand. So why did God have to force them to accept the Torah? The commentary of the Tosfot say that God was afraid they were going to change their minds, and therefore put the mountain over their heads. The MaHaRaL of Prague, famous rabbi who created the golem, the Frankenstein type monster, it was a very kind monster, and he helped the Jewish people in many ways during the time of the MaHaRaL, which was around 300 years ago in the city of Prague, Czechoslovakia. He gives a different interpretation because he finds it hard to understand why would the Jewish people change their mind. And if the Jewish people were given such merit for saying we will do and we will understand, how can we say it's something that they would have regretted shortly afterwards? And he explains that when the rabbis tell us that God held the mountain over their heads. When this is the way they interpret the verse, "Vayityasvu b'tachtit hahar," they stood under the mountain. What they mean to say is that God was giving them a very clear message. He gave them the understanding at that moment that they must accept the Torah, otherwise the world could not continue to exist. And it was very important for them to understand this. We know that there will be no world without the Torah, since the Torah gives meaning to our life. It gives meaning to our existence. But the Jewish people had to understand this at that moment, because they would have thought otherwise that the only reason why they keep the Torah is because they volunteered to keep the Torah. They said, we will do and we will understand, Na'aseh v'nishma. And if at some point they would change their minds, then they do not have to keep the Torah, because it was all voluntary from the beginning. Therefore, God made it very clear to the Jewish people at that moment that it's very nice you volunteered. I'm glad you volunteered. But once you volunteered, I'm telling you that the only way to continue to exist on this planet is if you keep the Torah, if you understand that you must keep the Torah. The Gemara in Shabbat continues that people seem to have some kind of, will now have an excuse. Say, we were forced. We were forced to keep the Torah. And the Gemara replies by saying, Hadar kiblu b'MaHaRaL. During the time of Achashverosh, during the Purim story, the people accepted the Torah from their own volition. It was totally voluntary. Again, the MaHaRaL asks, where do we find this? Where do we find in the Megillah or anywhere else that the people accepted the Torah from their own volition? And he answers by quoting a verse from Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther, that says, Kimu v'kiblu, the Jewish people accepted upon themselves to observe all the laws of Purim, including listening to the Megillah, including the obligation to hear the Megillah at night and by day, on Purim Day, every year until the end of time. The MaHaRaL explains further that if someone is not interested in a body of law, if someone is not interested in commandments, why would he want to accept upon himself another commandment? From the fact that Jewish people accepted upon themselves the commandment of hearing the Megillah at night and by day on Purim till the rest of time, till the end of time, and they accepted all the laws relating to Purim, that shows that they were interested in the divine command. So therefore, they showed interest in the Torah in its entirety. This is the celebration of Sinai that we will celebrate this Shabbat, and again during the festival of Shavuot in a number of months. A celebration that we had the merit to say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and only later will we understand. And the celebration that God gave us a Torah and actually obligated us to Torah by letting us understand that we must accept the Torah, we must keep the Torah for the continued existence of people on this earth. Have a wonderful Shabbat.